morning. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to be here today. We've been working towards this for several months now, getting ready for this event. This is the third year I think I've done work with Carolyn and the WITI organization, so I'm thrilled to be here. And as you just heard, IDC did just kick off its Women in IT research program. One of the things that this program does for me personally is it feeds my fire, if you will, around really driving change in this area. And it also helps our customers. One of the things that I've really stood by throughout my entire career is if I help my customers, I probably win in my job. And so this really accomplishes both for us. We've seen increasing need among technology companies and not just their HR organizations, but their leadership in how we change this issue around gender diversity in technology. So we're very, very excited about this. I started IDC in 1997, right when the internet had kicked off, and so I'm thrilled to be here to be able to talk about this today and really think about the evolution of not just the market, but how our research has evolved throughout the years. So let's get started with a couple of things around women in the workplace. And what you can see here is that today, 47% of all US workers are women. So we almost have parity at an overall level in the workplace. And 57% of all US college graduates today are women. More women graduate college today than men graduate college today. Think about the implications for that and how far women have come in terms of our education and our ability to be able to serve in the market. And 75% of all US healthcare workers are women today. Healthcare has been through a boom over the last 10 years, and it has especially benefited from having smart women enter into the healthcare industry. Okay, so now let's take a look at tech. Only 25% of US IT workforce is women today. 18% of US computer science graduates are women, down from 38% in the mid-'80s. We've gone backwards on this. 13% of US computer programming graduates are women. It was so great to hear Minette talk about all of the advances that you've taken forward in Adobe. But only 8% of primary patent holders today are women. So when we think about all of the world of innovation that's taking place in IT, only 8% of women are the primary filers on patents. And then only 2% of VC funding in the US was for women-founded startups. What on earth has happened here? We've seen this huge growth and influx of women into the workforce. We have about 57% of all women participating in the workforce today. And yet we've seen a decline in computer science graduates. This is a complete systemic failure of policy, of education, of investment. We have failed at multiple levels here, and this is not an easy fix. There are many, many things that need to be done to get us back onto the path where we can even begin to think about gender equity in the tech workplace. And so what we did as part of our survey with WITI this year, we interviewed about 1,120 of you, about 850 women, about 250 men, so that we could compare and contrast what you think the solution should be, and then take a look and see how men think that this should look also. So it's been a really great study to be able to help prioritize and think about what the steps are that we need to be able to take forward in this market today. So let me take you through something else. So while all this has been going on with education with women and women entering the workforce, there's been this systemic change in industry throughout the last 10 to 15 years, and really the last 70 years. So what you're looking at here is US GDP going back to just after World War II, 1947, all the way through to 2015. And what you can see is that most of the US market today is driven by services-based businesses. And what you can see is things like manufacturing and agriculture have declined significantly in terms of the amount of our economy that depends on those various industries. And there's something really, really special about services-based industries. They depend on humans. You need humans to run services-based industries. Think about healthcare, retail, government, education. All of these industries today rely very, very heavily on humans. In fact, 90% of all employees today work in services-based industries. And there's something else that's really important here also, and that is how it has changed where employees work. So while there's been the shift over to services over the last 70 years, take a look at what it's done for jobs. So this is a map of the United States, and what we're looking at here is the industries with the highest employment by state. So red is retail, blue is manufacturing. This is 1990. Now let's take a look as we step through time. Orange is healthcare, red is retail, blue is manufacturing. Healthcare is orange. Explains a lot, doesn't it, as to why our healthcare costs are so high today? So what we've seen is this massive shift of the employee base, mainly women, into healthcare industries. And what it now means for us in tech is that we're competing for all the smart women with good technical knowledge that have gone over to healthcare. So it creates a real problem for our technology sector as we go forward in order to be able to attract and retain women in the IT workforce, because now we've got a lot of competition in other industries. And here's something else that's really, really interesting about services economies over the last 75 years. They have been really difficult to automate up until now. Agriculture is almost all automated. If you go and look at farms today, you don't see people out there anymore. They're just huge machines out there and driving huge efficiencies in the agriculture industry. What used to take 10 people back in 1947, would take 10 people back in 1947 now takes 1 worker today. And in the manufacturing industry, what used to take 7 people now only takes 1 worker today. But in services, over the last 75 years, we've barely eked out a doubling in the productivity around the services organizations. And if we play this forward, this very slow growth in productivity in services, it's going to take another 50 years before we hit a factor of 3 in the services market. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the services industry is ripe for disruption. Whenever you see numbers like this, there's massive opportunity and there's huge disruption that's about to take place. And so for a lot of you in tech, you probably hear a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning and how important that's going to be in our industry going forward. It's because of this reason. Because if most of our employees are working in services-based industries and most of our economy depends on these industries, our economic growth is going to depend on driving productivity up. And if we don't drive productivity up, we're going to have a stagnant economy. And typically what we know is when we drive productivity up, everybody benefits. Higher wages, higher profits, more investment, lower unemployment. And so while there's a lot of fear around AI, it actually should result in very, very positive outcomes for our economy as we go forward. The other thing that happens when you drive higher levels of productivity is innovation. It explodes. And at the moment, we tend to see that innovation is at its highest point. A really good proxy for innovation is the number of patents that are filed in the market today. And what you can see is that there are about 3 million patents filed in 2016, but 43% of them came from China. And then a really good proxy for things like brands, new brands that are exploding, there were 7 million new trademarks filed in 2016, but 52% of those came from China. So we have a problem. We've got internal competition for employees, and we don't have enough IT skills. So what are we going to do to fix this? We're going to meet the needs of our customers. When we did a separate survey of businesses, and we talked to their IT leaders as well as their business leaders, and we asked them, what are your top business goals? What are you focusing on over the next 5 years? Number 1, innovate or deliver on new products and services. Number 2, invest in R&D. Number 3, deliver digital products, improve marketing, make the workforce more efficient, and expand geographically. What's not up here? Cutting costs, right? We've gone through this huge piece of our industry where cutting out costs was number 1, driving revenue was number 1. A lot of business leaders have woken up and realized that what we really need to do is innovate again. So this is a massive opportunity to be able to engage with a much broader part of our workforce, and that, of course, is women. And what it means for businesses going forward is that they've got to think about AI, right? We have to think about driving up productivity, not just with people, but with tools also. So when we ask these business leaders, what does AI mean for your business going forward? Interestingly, they said, number 1, improve employee productivity. Number 2, free up time for innovation. So what we already know about AI is that what companies expect to get out of it meets their business goals. And in tech, those are 2 really important things to put together. We always know when there's a product in the market that fits a need, it usually does very well. So it's going to be a very, very multifaceted approach to AI going forward. But what it means is that the IT jobs are going to be very different going forward. And what you're looking at here is a forecast of US IT jobs from 2016 out through 2026. There's a couple of things that are really important. First, we're going to add about 500 million new IT jobs in the US over the next 10 years. And we know that a lot of those jobs are going to be high paying. At the moment, we look for bachelor degree minimums. We know that experience counts in IT. Manette said it. It's really hard to find people with experience. H-1B visas have been capped out, and we've got a large retiring workforce. Yet, at the same time, we haven't been graduating enough kids out of school. So while computer science degrees have increased 10% over the last 10 years, healthcare degrees have increased 168%. Bioscience, 67%. Engineering, 51%. All right, so now the pipeline is looking really thin. And what we also know is that just under 60% of all US computer science graduates actually never go into IT. Right? So this is a huge problem for us. We have a gap. There is very much a need, and yet we've got half the population that hasn't been fully engaged. What's the solution? I don't think this is very hard. Okay, so let's take a look and see where we are in terms of diversity and inclusion. So in the survey that we did with WITI members, we asked them, how would you rate your organization in terms of its employee diversity on each of the following areas? And we looked at 9 different levels of diversity within companies, ranging from ethnic diversity, age diversity, all the way through to disabilities diversity. Number 1 is in terms of where companies are excelling is ethnic diversity. 46% of the women we surveyed said that their company has very good diversity when it comes to ethnic participation. And then 42% of women said that they have good participation in terms of age diversity. And then men are more positive. 50% of men said that they thought that their company did well in terms of ethnicity and ages. Okay, and if you look down, men think that we're doing better in all these categories. So now let's go almost all the way to the bottom. Gender diversity, number 8 out of 9. Only 28% of women felt that their organization had very strong diversity when it came to gender participation, but 45% of men felt that we were doing okay. So, okay, after all these years of working so hard, we're number 8 of 9. I think we've done reasonably well in terms of bringing in minorities into the technology sector. I wouldn't say we've done great, we've done okay. But as Carolyn reminded me of recently, women aren't minorities. So how are we going to move forward if we don't engage with half the population? And I guess the thing I would say is, well, at the moment, women are minorities in tech, right? And so this is why it gets lumped in with diversity and inclusion. Only in the survey, you told us that 21% of the women in your company were in senior leadership positions. This is, of course, a challenge without great leaders out there, without being able to speak about all of the challenges and all of the advantages of having women who bring very diverse opinions to what we see around innovation. It's going to be very difficult. And then you also told us that only 34% of women formed your employee base at your companies. That's actually a little bit higher than what we see in industry statistics. So in terms of what you're doing, you're actually doing better and feeling better than what many other women are in other companies and other industries. So this is clearly a challenge. And I would say a lot of it's because we haven't been bold enough. When we asked all of you if your companies have diversity goals and strategies, only 35% said yes. Another 20% or so said no, and then 42% weren't sure. And then of those of you that said yes, the strategy is to increase the proportion of women as a percent of all employees and to increase the percent of women as part of the new hiring process. It's okay. I think it's kind of mediocre, right? We've got a third of companies saying that they're doing something, and then they're going to increase the proportion. I think we need something bolder. We've been doing this for a long time, and it really isn't getting us anywhere. I think we need to have much more bolder visions. And I think that while it's very difficult to say by 2025 we want to have half of all of our employees be women, I think it's a much better goal and it's a much bolder goal for everybody to work towards than this sort of mediocre, we're going to step through it, we're going to take small steps and increment our way through this. I think if you set the goal really high, maybe instead of getting to Mars, you hit the moon. But I think if you have mediocre goals, you're going to get mediocre outcomes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about unconscious bias. You probably hear a lot about this in the press right now. And so I'll boil it down for you. Unconscious bias is this idea that there's nothing necessarily sinister going on. There's nothing necessarily that you can really point to that's called discrimination. But people just don't know what people don't know. And a lot of this has been pointed out with men, right? If men are in senior positions in technology, they may have good intentions, but they might not necessarily fully understand what the scope of the problem is. So we asked everybody in the study to answer to about 12 different types of statements, and we asked them how much they agreed with the statement. So the first statement is, women are underrepresented in STEM fields at my organization. 56% of women said yes, that is true. Only 26% of men said yes, that is true. And when we went through and we looked at what we would describe as all the sort of negative consequences for women, so things like the culture is geared towards men, or there's a lack of professional support for women in STEM roles, women by far agreed with those negative statements significantly more than what men did. And then when we looked at the positive statements, so things like my organization has adequate numbers of women in senior leadership positions, men are much more likely to agree with the positive statements, and women are much more likely to disagree with those. Okay, so we have a very big difference of opinion here. The one thing we can agree on is that there's a lack of quality female candidates for STEM jobs. So this is something that we can all come together on, and everybody agrees on this, but we just have to accept that when you have different experiences, or you have different upbringing, or you have different set of skills, you're going to have very different ideas about what the real problem is. Okay? So I think that there's a lot of other data out here that shows this, but this is a very real problem for changing what we see in the IT workforce. And then there's something else that came out of the study that I think is really great. And what we found is that workplace discrimination is strongly linked with diversity. And it's linked in a way which you may not necessarily consider intuitive. We know that as workplace discrimination declines, as gender diversity increases. So the more women you bring into your organization, the less likely you are to have issues with discrimination. And some people might think the opposite. Oh my gosh, we bring these women in, nobody gets along, we're going to have all these lawsuits against us. We find the absolute opposite is actually taking place in the market. I think the challenges that companies run into is really what you see on the pie chart, and that is they don't act quickly and decisively enough. And that's something that you've seen a lot of change in over the last 2 years. I think, especially for myself, when I look at some of these issues when they've come up, companies just haven't taken big enough steps and reacted quickly enough, or they've just kind of brushed it aside. I think what you've seen more recently is that CEOs are losing their jobs if they don't react quickly to these issues of discrimination. And I think that we want to see more of this than just 35% of companies acting quickly. We really want to see 100% of companies acting quickly on these issues. So this is a really, I think, positive outcome. The one thing that I think that really came out of the study that took me by surprise was the level of sexual harassment that women report as they work in either tech roles or tech companies. 61% of the women in the survey said that they had experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. 15% of them at their current job, 57% at a previous job. So what does that tell you? Women leave if they're being sexually harassed at their job. This is why you see churn of women. This is a very, very broad problem that we're facing right now. And 66% of women and 47% of men in the study said that they knew an average of 6 other friends or colleagues who had talked to them or experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, right? Every one person knows 6 other people where this has been an issue. The one thing that I think has been interesting is the Me Too movement recently. I think that I agree with all of you that when we asked you about what impact Me Too has had on the workplace, and that it's driven awareness. I think for us in the industry, we think everybody knows about these problems. We don't. I had a really great conversation with an analyst that works in our application development team, and when I told him only 13% of US college graduates, computer science, application developer graduates were women, he said, no, there's no way that can be true. Right? We have to keep talking about this, and you have to say it more than once. You probably have to say it 10 times before it starts to get through. So if there's one takeaway for you in this presentation, I have a lot of data in here. Pick a data point and go tell somebody about it, because you might be surprised when you think that everybody knows about it. They really don't. Okay, so what is it that women want from their careers? Okay, this is a headline. Are you ready? Women want the same thing as men. And number one, we want fair compensation as pay, just like men do. Number two, sense of purpose or mission. I thought Carolyn talked about that beautifully this morning. We definitely see this become more important as employees age, but men and women feel this way. And then number three, work-life balance. It's such a myth that women want to be able to leave work early and they want flexibility so they can go get the kids and go put dinner on the table. Men want it at just the same rate that women want this. Okay? We all want the same things. The areas where there are some differences, women are much more likely to look for opportunities for career advancement and respect from colleagues or customers, whereas men are more focused on skills improvement and future employee opportunities. And you know what? I think men are smart. I think there's going to be a lot of change in our industry going forward, and you should reskill. If you're not thinking about reskilling or adding to your capabilities, you are going to miss out. I do think that the other thing that's interesting is that men aren't feeling held back by respect, right? So they're a little bit freer, I think, in some respects, to be able to go out and drive this reskilling for themselves. But I think we shouldn't get so caught up in worrying about, am I good enough? Am I going to get the respect from everybody? You should go out and get those skills. Build those skills where you feel weak. I think you heard Manette say that beautifully this morning. Okay, so where's the need? So if you look at the x-axis, that's how, the importance of those different features. So the further you are out on the x-axis, the more important the feature. But where's the gap? Number one, compensation and pay. Number two, opportunities for promotion, sense of purpose or mission, ongoing skills learning, and work-life balance. So if you're in an HR department at a technology company today, and you can only focus on 4 or 5 things, these are the 4 or 5 things I would focus on, right? This is universal. It's something we see again and again. It cuts across age. It cuts across income. I think this is really the map for how to engage with women as we think about the tech market going forward. Okay, so we asked everybody in the survey, okay, if you had 20 different things you could do internally and 12 things you could do externally, which one of these things would you do and how would you weight them? So we asked women and we asked men, and I love this data. I mean, if we want to continue with some funny stereotypes, this would definitely be it. So we asked the men what they say. I was like, oh, it's easy. We'll just fix things internally. There's 4 things. We're going to create more senior leaders and give more money, and we'll put in bonuses, and we'll have fair hiring, and we're done, right? Then we asked women, well, we're going to need to balance. We're going to need to balance the internal with the external, and we're going to need to do 9 different things, and we're going to have to pay attention to all of those things. So what's the answer? The answer is there's no silver bullet. The answer is not that you're going to take on 9 or 10 different things, and the answer isn't there's just going to be 4 things either, right? It's going to be something in the middle. But what I really did like about this data was that it really showed that everybody can come together on a number of areas. And the one area that really stands out for me is pay equity policies. For me, nothing says fair like you're getting paid the same thing. Put your money where your mouth is. Okay, so this is what's interesting about getting data on gender pay gap. In the US, we report on overall statistics around gender pay gap. And at the moment, overall, in all industries, women are earning about 82% of what men are. In computer science and mathematical occupations, it's about 87% of men's earnings. So women make about 13% less than men. In the UK this year, they forced companies to file their gender pay gap data at a company level, and the company's name is put on it. So I went and took a long look at this data, and there were 10,000 named companies in this database. They had to have 250 more employees. And here's what we found. 77% of UK organizations pay men more than women, and 50% of them pay them 10% more than men. And when men are paid more, they make, on average, about 17% more than women. And yet, when women make more, we only make 9% more than men. So the UK is a very mature economy. There's a lot of tech in there. I went through and I looked at all of the technology companies in there. They're some of the worst offenders at gender pay issues. We will be reporting on that at IDC. But this is a systemic problem, right? It's not just our industry. It's not just in our country. It's everywhere. We just have to accept this as a problem. And when we asked in the survey, do you believe that your employer provides equal pay? Only 37% of women said yes, but 68% of men said yes. Okay? We have to keep talking about this. Take some of this data, go talk to somebody about it. Let's start dispelling all these myths that are out there in the market. I think one of the things that we have that's a challenge here is there's not enough transparency around pay. And I know particularly for me in my generation, you don't talk about how much you make. It's like crass, right? Less than 30% say that HR or their management provides pay ranges to employees. I think this is wrong. If I was entering into the IT workforce today, I want to know, what do I have to do to get to the next step, and how much more money am I going to make, right? It's really, really simple. And I think a lot of women leave not realizing if they hung in there maybe another 2 years, really push for a promotion, maybe you could make $20,000, $30,000, or $40,000 at the next level. I think a lot of us think it's like, oh, I'm not going to hang in here for another $5,000. I'm going to go somewhere else, and maybe I'll make another $5,000 there, right? That could be a mistake. It could also be a good thing if you go to another employer and they pay you 20 or 30% more. I would encourage that too. But less than a third of respondents say they're in a position to see other employees pay. Again, we don't share this information. I got into a fight with my son a couple of weeks ago. He insisted on knowing how much I made. Mom, how much do you make? I need to know, Mom. This is really important for my career. I want to know, should I go into tech? Should I go into analytics? I'm not going to tell you how much I'm making. That's ridiculous. And now I'm thinking about it, I was like, why wouldn't I just tell him that? That's crazy. I've got to go back and I've got to tell him how much I made when I first started and how much I made in the middle of my career and the things I did to be able to drive my income up over time. It's really, really critical. What's really interesting about this data is that while only 14% share their pay and compensation details with their coworkers, 30% of the 20 to 34-year-olds share that pay information. So if you're hiring younger workers today, let me tell you, they're telling each other how much they're making, okay? It's not a secret anymore. Here's something else you can do. So we talk a lot about mentoring in this market and how mentoring helps move women along. Let me tell you something. Mentoring helps move both women and men along. 45% of the men in the sample said that they had a professional mentor. 57% of the women had a professional mentor. And this is the best data in here. Are you ready? The more often you use a mentor, the more money you're going to make. Men in the $250,000 plus income range, 60% of them used a professional mentor. Women earning more than $250,000, 77% of them had a professional mentor. What are you all going to go do tomorrow? Go get a mentor. Okay, now here's something very interesting. Salaries are 15 to 16% higher for both men and women that are mentored. Now take a look at this. Women with male mentors make 13% more in salary than those with female mentors. Okay, let's just take that in for a second. With men, 79% of them have a male mentor. Only 53% of women have a male mentor. So I looked at this very long and hard. I was like, how could this be? All right. We have really just gotten started in IT, okay? It's really when you go back to the 50s or 60s that women got started in IT. We don't have 15 or 16 generations of workers that we can relate to, right? We've got 2 or 3. So we need to take it a little easier on ourselves. And I think men do drive a harder bargain when it comes to pay. I've seen it myself. I've been a manager. They're just not embarrassed about asking for money, and neither should we be. I think a couple of the areas where we do see that women are looking for different things from their mentors than men is navigating the obstacles or issues in the organization, right? Again, we don't have a lot of experience here, and a lot of the women we work with don't have a lot of experience either. So you've got to go find somebody that's either become very much a senior leader or has great advice to give, or go work with a man, okay? Men have to be part of this solution. And what are men looking for from their mentors? Skills, right? This is a common theme with men. They're moving forward. They're building their skills. They're making sure they're getting to the next level. They're thinking about their next pay range already. So it's really, really interesting to see how this evolves differently. And then the one thing that I thought was really fascinating in this, high income earners worked with their mentor to advocate for them. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that you can have a mentor and a mentor provides you with advice. An advocate goes out and takes action, either action for you or changes in your company. So if you're going to go find a mentor that you want to work with, I would go find somebody that's willing to actually go out and advocate, talk about you, work with your manager, start thinking very differently about this. So we talked about not having a lot of women with experience in the IT field. This is the first time in history where we've had 4 generations of women in IT. Okay? It's very, very different for us. And I would say that there's a lot of mentoring that can go back and forward between women. I've actually seen this idea of reverse mentoring, which is where you work with somebody younger than you to teach you a skill you didn't know. Please, somebody come help me with social media. Please. So while older women, I think, can help in guidance and providing advice on what's worked and what hasn't worked and how much you should be paid, I actually think that the inverse is true too. And I think that there are so many new skills that are coming into the market where you could work with somebody younger who's going to mentor you also. Reskilling is going to be so critical. I'm not going to go through everything on this slide, but the things you should learn if you want to learn new skills, I'm calling them the 7 C's. Cloud, cybersecurity, cognitive coding, consumable data, which is data integration, customer experience, and chain for blockchain. And then the other one is analytics. Analytics is in every job going forward. It doesn't matter what you do. You have to get smart. Statistics is something you really should become more comfortable with in the workplace. And then in terms of workplace skills, you're going to have to be multidisciplinary. You can't just be good at one thing anymore. It's got to be about insights and action. You're going to have to think about how you prioritize information overload, use tools for those, and if your company doesn't have them, go out and make them, buy them. And then this idea of emotional intelligence. I think that for our tech industry, we're in such a mature phase right now. This idea that we can have sort of these entrepreneurs running companies and running roughshod over the companies and really not paying attention to the details, I think is over. I think we need very mature leaders that can think empathetically across a number of different areas in the market. And I think we're going to see some pretty big changes in technology leaders going forward. The one area, too, that I'm going to talk about is this idea that we are inventing technology for social good. So we have the FAA for aviation. We have inspectors that come in and look at our houses when they're being built and when roads are being built. What's the certification or the inspections agency for the social good of IT as we build it out? We don't have any. We're unregulated. I think the first sign that we're seeing a change there is GDPR, which is being pushed through. It's privacy regulations through the UK. We're going to see more of this, and I think we need it. You think about the digital disruption that's about to take place in IT. It's going to be embedded in every job we do, every industry that we have. It's going to be completely widespread. We need to start thinking more about how we're changing the lives of the people that are our customers and our employees. And I also think that we're going to start to see organizations pay a lot more attention, not just to physical well-being of its employees, but the mental well-being of its employees too. When you think about so many of the technology companies today, they have a diverse workforce, they're remote. You don't have people coming into the office like you used to 20 or 30 years ago. And when you think about the information overload that we're all taking in, we need to be able to help our employees skill through that. And that has very much an impact on both the physical and the mental well-being of employees today. So I'm going to leave you with 3 things. Number 1, be intentional. And Carolyn said it. If you have something that you want to make a change in, make a change in it. And ask yourself every day, am I being bold enough? What are the 1 or 2 things I really want to change? Let's not do this, we're going to do 17 things anymore. We're going to do 1 or 2 in order to drive that change. And then be transparent. Share information that makes you uncomfortable. I'm going to go talk to my son about my salary, I promise you. And find yourself a mentor, not just somebody that's going to get you through this gender pay gap issue, but think about reverse mentoring also. And then be human. Let's all be empathetic to our employees and to our customers and our partners. Let's think about what it is that we're building and how this is really going to shape the world and what it's going to mean for innovation. And really think about the depth and the level of how technology is going to change us going forward. And just remember, I think people are the difference in this services economy going forward. So technology can drive innovation, but I think it's the people that really multiply that technology innovation. All right, with that, I thank you very much.